Welcome to Beyond the O.R. with Dr. Kevin Brenner. I'm a board-certified plastic surgeon in Beverly Hills. I want to take you beyond my world of plastic surgery, diving deep into exciting hot topics and delving even deeper into compelling characters that I've met along the way. We'll be talking with attorneys, actors, comedy writers, Navy SEALs, and many other fascinating and inspiring people with truly intriguing stories to share. So let's jump right in. Welcome back to Beyond the O.R. My promise on this show is to always bring you guys, my viewers, interesting stories. And interesting stories start with interesting people. And as far as I'm concerned, just about everyone's interesting. Today, though, we have a very special guest with an inspiring story of resilience, redemption, reform. You guys are not going to believe this story if you haven't heard it yet. And even if you have, you may not believe it. Today we have Mr. Franky Carrillo. Frankie was age 16 when he was wrongfully arrested, accused, tried, convicted for a murder that he had nothing to do with, and spent 20 years in federal prison before he was able to appeal and be exonerated in 2013. And if you don't believe me, you should watch the special that they did on Netflix on the Innocence Files. This story is remarkable, is upsetting, and if you don't at least start to cry, then I don't know what to say. Frankie, so nice to have you here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So Frankie and I met not that long ago at a supper party that my cousin was doing. She's a wine distributor. My cousin Fleur.
Okay.
She's great. She's like a sister to me. Anyway, she's a wine distributor. She was doing this
She's
event,
amazing. Yeah.
and I was like, okay, she invites me. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go have some food and maybe some wine. And I showed up with my friend Michael, and we had a very unexpected night. Part of that was meeting Frankie and hearing his story, which is incredible. I don't want that to take up the entirety of the show, but I do want people to know what happened to you, because it's so wrong and it's like so upsetting. Every time I read about it, watch about it, it just reignites that.
Yeah.
So let's just start with Linwood.
Sure.
But when I mention Linwood, what does that bring to mind for you?
So Linwood is a suburb here in Los Angeles. For those who don't know, maybe you're on the East Coast or other parts of the world listening to this, watching this. It's on the sort of the south side of town, and Linwood predominantly at the time was Latino and African American people who lived there, and it's where my childhood home was. But it's also where the crime that I was accused of happened. It's where, it's also where the story is very, very layered, but it's also the home of the Linwood Vikings, which was
Right.
these bad officers who were working and, working beyond, their so-called call of duty. And so they're also, as the story unfolds, they're...
So the Linwood Vikings were like a subpopulation of the sheriff's department, right?
Correct, yeah.
Like a gang in their own right.
Oh, wow.
A I guess white supremacist gang of cops.
Right.
Is really, that's my understanding of it.
Yep, that's it. But on the very, I hear Linwood. I should maybe just go to, this is where I grew up. This is where I came of age. This is where home was. My childhood friends existed. So even though it's the name or the memory of Linwood has been sort of perverted with this injustice, end of the day, it was home. Yeah.
But that was like ripped away from you, right? I mean, and even before this happened, you had a little bit of an unconventional childhood, right?
Yep.
your parents were separated. Your dad was raising you. You have two siblings?
Two sisters and a brother, yeah.
And your dad, was he raising you as a single father?
He was, yeah.
Right. And with all that, it was like, or at least my impression from everything I've read and seen about you, is that he did a pretty good job.
Yeah, thanks, bro.
At least with you. I mean, like,
Yeah.
you I don't know your siblings.
No, I'm not with you. No.
And like, you seem like you have a really good head on your shoulders, right? And so you were just kind of caught up.
I give him credit, man. I give my dad credit for it. Yeah,
and you ended up getting caught up in really shitty circumstance. So can you just like kind of briefly go through kind of what transpired and how you got arrested and what happened prior to that, and then subsequently what happened?
Yeah. I'm grateful that I peppered in the Linwood Vikings. And so it's, the local law enforcement that was there in Linwood at the time. So years prior to the crime being committed, where Donald Sarpy, the victim at the center of all this, was murdered, I was a young boy riding my bike through the neighborhood with my buddies. So we had our Diamondbacks or BMXs, whatever it was, and we're just being kids. And a local deputy pulled us over. It wasn't because we were violating the traffic laws. He just wanted to talk to us, and so we chatted. And it started off with like, "Hey, do you have a girlfriend? Where do you live?" Ha ha ha! Everyone's kind of laughing. Dude did his job, broke the ice, made us feel very comfortable. And at some point, he says, "Do you mind if I take a photograph of you?" Right. And so, I might have been 13, 14. I don't have maybe even as an adult, I would have not been able to say no. So I'm like, yeah, sure, I guess. Like, you're the cop, dude.
Now
like,
especially.
Yeah,
now
dude.
You're running for office.
Yeah, exactly, right, exactly. Now it's different. Like, so now you're just kind of like, by default, you're just like, why are you even asking, dude? Like, you're the adult,
Right.
And so he gets out of his car and he gets the Polaroid camera that was in his trunk. And as we were standing on our bikes or sitting on our bicycle seats, he just comes over and just snaps a photograph, and wrote our names on the back of it and
indexing you guys
basically. So he does, he's collecting his nexus. He's collecting his information about who he ran into today or whatever. So many years later, this crime occurs, tragedy, right? So innocent bystanders gunned down in a senseless crime, and that family was obviously impacted. But it was not only that family was harmed, but then my family was harmed when they accused the wrong person. So they used this photo. So back to the photograph, they used this photograph that they had collected, they had in their files or whatever, to show one of the witnesses. And the initial story was that the boy was shown a photograph, and he said, "Yep, that's the guy who did it, Franky Carrillo. That's the shooter."
Right.
Seemed to be enough reason to arrest somebody, and so there I am being arrested. As the boy who's now in cuffs, trying to make sense of what's going on, all I had was the truth, which was almost like kind of laughable. It was like, no, come on, you have to be kidding here. I felt like the fact that the crime was out of murder was almost like kind of laughable to me, because I'm like, dude, like if you knew me,
it's not me.
Like you're going like, this is not me. But
And
it was
how
almost
old
like a
are you,
prank.
Frankie, at
16
this
years
point?
old.
Okay.
So I thought it was
You're
a
a
prank.
baby.
I'm a kid, and I don't know. I mean, it wasn't like, people weren't pranking people at that level.
Right.
That's kind of extreme. But it was just like my mind wasn't able to process it. And
Right.
I was a boy, so I kind of like, this has to be a joke, which makes sense to me now as an adult. But these folks were not laughing. They were like, nope, we got you. And I'm just like, shit, now what?
And so and there's a lot more intricacies to it, but there were 5 or 6 guys who all corroborated that eventually, right?
Yeah.
But they were coerced by the lead detective, who was one of these sheriff's department Linwood Vikings, coerced into saying, yeah, this is the guy. We know it's the guy. You got to tell us that he's the guy. Yeah. And so then cut to you end up in juvie, right? Yep. And then eventually you're transferred because you're there waiting trial. Yep. And while you're waiting trial, you turned 18, right?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
So
and then And then so you get transferred to
The
where?
adult LA County Jail. So
Well,
you go
still
from-
awaiting trial.
Still awaiting trial, exactly.
So did you get? Was the trial? As an adult? Did you get tried as an adult?
I did,
even
yeah.
though-
Great question. Yeah.
So you got arrested at 16, but you still got tried as an adult.
At the time, there was just the laws were a little bit different than they are today. So it's a different dynamic now, which is great. But at the time, if you're being accused of a just a serious crime, a felony, 9 times out of 10 you're being tried as an adult, and so I was. Just on some degree, I kind of felt like I wanted to be around the adults. I'm not sure again what I was thinking about the juvenile side, but I just figured like, hey, if the adults are there, my philosophy was that like the adults will figure it out. They'll protect me. They'll assess. They'll do the right thing. And then I get there, and my first jury trial, I was still underage. I was 17 years old now at this point, and the jury came back with the hung jury. So the jury wasn't able to decide either guilt or innocence, but I think it broke 8 not guilty, 5 guilty. So or maybe my math is 8 to 4. So it's 12. So they had an opportunity either like just let the case just end there and just release me, or retry me, and they chose to retry me. And so now I turn 18, and
in the second trial, which is astounding. It's not like it's a new crime, right?
Right.
And so they're charging you as though it happened 2 years later. But in the second trial, the evidence was not the same as it was in the first trial.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So what was the big thing that they either included or omitted from the evidence locker on the second trial?
Oh my God. I think what happens with like kind of take two. So you get the first trial, witnesses get a chance to kind of practice their testimony, and they did.
And the prosecutors get a chance to see what they did wrong.
Yeah,
more
exactly.
importantly.
And so what's so bizarre, and I look back now and I just wonder all the places where they could have said like, look, time out, this doesn't sound right. And so one of the moments that happened that didn't happen in the second trial but happened in the first trial was that the lead witness that was used against me was asked a very simple question, which was like, how do you know it's Frankie who did this? Like, give us more than just like that's the guy who did it. And the young boy, who happened to be I think 16 years old, said, well, it's Frankie because he's a guy in my math class. We go to school together. So the guy in my math class is the same guy who shot this pistol and killed Donald Sarpy. And so then the attorney says, well, what school are you referring to? And so he says, Linwood High School. Like, we Linwood High School, he's in my math class, or he's in an A class. Maybe that wasn't math, but he was in a...
Is that
we
true?
attend
that
school.
Was true? You guys were in school together or no?
I've never attended that school in my life.
Well, so how are you not able to in cross-examination
Right.
have
So
that teased out?
So this is at the core of like why these things happen, right? So the boy is digging himself in a deeper hole. So now the lie is getting out of control. Now he's placing me in a school that I never attended, and then he goes as far. This is where I thought the case was over. The guy says, "Well, now that you're talking, give us more. Give another example, right?" He says, "Well, this is it. I saw Frankie get his butt kicked by one of my friends, and during this fight, my friend tore Frankie's shirt off, and it exposed his big tattoo on his chest." So I'm thinking, wow, like this is now it's more like the details of it.
Are you about to show us a tattoo on your chest?
Kevin, I wish that the attorney would have said that in court, because even though I would have been embarrassed, my little pigeon chest would have been exposed, But it would have been great. Like, Frankie, do you mind standing on the table so the jury can see you? And I would have been, I wish that would have happened, but he didn't ask.
Greg would have asked.
Yeah, exactly.
Greg, he probably would have marched you in there. Just in pants.
Exactly. Yeah, Greg would have definitely done that. So it was a moment where like the witness is almost identifying another person. So no tattoos then or now, and so as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, oh man, this is over. The star witness is saying that the murderer has this big tattoo on his chest, and it's definitely not me. And so these moments of like what I think is like clarity and like the truth. Somehow gets like ignored, and the kind of trial continues. And so is that the fault of my attorney? I think so.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
say, hey,
So?
Yes.
So So there's a lot of, there's a lot of pointing, finger pointing to do here if it's the attorney or the witnesses. But at the end of the day, hung jury, moving on to my second trial, witnesses had been prepped and you kind of what to say, what not to say. And so jury comes back with the guilty verdict. And imagine this young boy, which was at the time, I might have been 18 years old, calendar, years.
Yeah.
But I think psychologically, mentally, I was probably rocking 14, 15. The trauma, might have stunted me for a number of reasons, but I was definitely not operating on some like pre-college kid ready to go move into the world, right? I was
a survival mode.
I was exactly.
Survival.
Well, so what was going on in your head when the verdict came back? I mean, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't fathom.
Oh my God.
I can't fathom. I can't fathom that going to jail for 2 years and
Right.
waiting trial.
Right.
So I mean, that's got to be rough.
Right.
And traumatic, right? But you then are like, this is like a fucking circus,
Yeah.
and
they're all laughing at me. It's a moment where, I was relying heavily on the adults to do the right thing. I'm the only kid in the room. The judge, the attorneys, the jury, jurors, everyone there. And you're just looking around thinking, someone's watching this, right? Someone's making sure that this is working out the way it's supposed to. And then when it doesn't, I don't think I had the fortitude or the mental capacity to understand. I kind of just went numb. Like my mind could not process what had happened.
Maybe it's the way of your mind protecting, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's such a huge thing. It's your life.
Yeah.
It's your life. It's your family's life. They affected. There's a victim that is dead, that you're being charged, and their family when you had nothing to do with it. How were you able to keep going during these challenging times, especially not only being accused of something, but also how did you keep it together to remain strong and keep moving forward and stay within your innocence and say, I am innocent, I don't care, I am innocent, How was that for you on a daily basis? How did you get the strength? What motivated you to keep moving?
20 years is a long time.
Yeah.
There was moments where I'd given up, moments where I, surprised myself that I still had some gas in my tank to just keep going. But I think I'm the type of person who, from a very young age, sort of used real life experiences around me as like lessons. I'm not sure if that makes any sense or not, but I remember thinking, this will work its way out. It'll. I'm very optimistic, so I just sort of had this like very hopeful way of thinking about things. But even under the circumstances of like the people who were supposed to protect you didn't, but I was left with having to still believe that they would change their mind or that the system would somehow get it right. Like there was no other door.
In order to survive.
There's only one door.
Yeah.
So I had to even though it was like my abuser, think about like in a situation where like maybe moving away from the actual story, like the person who's been abusing you, you still want to receive love from them. It was like this weird relationship with the court system or with the judicial system where there is no other door but to go back and face that judge or face that situation there. And so I was sort of caught with like, do I abandon all hope that they will get it right or correct their mistake?
But you're doing this all on your own? I mean, there's no avenue in the prison system. It's not like you're going to the DMV as disorganized as that is, and like at least you're like you have a number and you're in line, right?
Oh, right.
Like there's no. It's not like there's attorneys walking through Folsom going, okay, who can I help today?
Right, for sure. But I will tell you that speaking of these moments that just like guided me or were symbols or they were just like these forces or these pieces of advice, right? But when I got to where I got to, now I'm actually officially doing time. At the time, it was called the California Youth Authority. So it was like prison for juveniles. It was a state prison, basically, but just for kids. And when I got there, I don't know if it was a staff member or maybe another ward who was there, another prisoner. But the advice I got from them after them, that told them about why I was there was like, don't give up, which is very easy to, to advise someone. But I remember they said, make some noise. And at the time for me, making noise was like writing a letter. There's no internet at the time. So you're writing letters,
Right.
Messages in the bottle, right? Just like write a letter and see if maybe someday someone will
And
return.
sending them where?
Yeah, so the idea was
mean-
to send him to like 48 hours. Oprah got a letter, random attorneys, just like, look, I mean, the message was pretty sad. It was like a mayday. There's myself in a prison. I don't belong here. Will you look into my case? Which is a pathetic way of like exercising your life, but
And
that's all I
like, who's
had.
going to take that seriously?
Well, for the next
even if it's vetted, like if I receive a letter from someone saying, "Hey, I need your help,"
Right.
I was wrongly accused. Why is some random individual, entertainer or not, going to believe you and want to take that on?
Yeah, no, I'm with you, but it's all I had.
No, I know.
Yeah,
But-
it's an interesting way of thinking about it, but I think you're definitely right. And I'll tell you, man, that they assign you by right or by law an appellate attorney. So if you don't have an attorney to appeal your case, they will assign someone to you. So they assigned me an attorney, and through correspondence, we basically got like a little game plan going. And my game plan was like, look, they made a mistake. This is basically it. And so he appealed it, and it was denied. And the guy, it was such a bizarre moment, but the guy wrote me a letter and said, Mr.
The judge?
Carrillo, no, the attorney, my appellate attorney says, hey, you've been denied. I tried, did my part, legally, I did what I had to do. They've denied you, and that's as far as I can go. Like you're on your own. And he said, to his credit, here's my being optimistic again, or being kind of just like hopeful, right? He sends me a cheat sheet. He says, like, okay, these are your next steps if you decide to move forward. Your next step is to write the California Supreme Court, or your next appeal levels to them. I'm 18 years old. I am in this new environment of incarceration. I'm lucky if I can put a sentence together verbally or in print. And, I'm just a mess. But I look at that cheat sheet and I'm like, well, I guess I don't have an attorney. I guess I got to do it myself. And so I borrowed the guy's manual typewriter. Somebody else, I might have borrowed their dictionary or from the law library. Got a bunch of paper, typing paper, and I wrote, based on what he had sent me, some version of an appeal to the California Supreme Court. That's all I had was myself. And I sent out this one-page letter thinking, these are the people who are going to believe me.
Right.
And so...
And this is... What age were you at this
18
point?
years old.
Oh, this is right
Yeah,
after. Okay.
I might have been 19, but still 18, 19. And so the letter goes out, and I'm just like, hopeful. And a few months later, they call me to the office and say, hey, you got legal mail. You got a letter from the Supreme Court. And I saw it. I saw it before they gave it to me. And it had like this like old English font on it. I'm like, wow. It said California Supreme Court, Justice, whatever, George was the guy's name actually. And I just got pumped up like, oh man, I've been acknowledged. They wrote me back.
Right.
And you have to sign for it. So they give it to you. And I went back to my room, to my cell, and I opened it up and I started reading it. And really before I can really read what they wrote, I saw the big stamp that said denied.
Oh.
And I started crying. I'm a big crybaby. I've been crying my whole life, and I'm crying again, And I'm grateful that they sent me what I had sent them. Sent it back, my one-page appeal. They had returned it to me. So their denial letter, and then
You didn't get a Xerox machine in
No,
prison?
no, exactly. I had the original, man. And so I once the tears sort of subsided, I read back what I had sent them. And, I misspelled my name or mistyped my name. I read back what I had sent them. It was more like mumbo jumbo. It wasn't legal jargon at all. It was just like some
Well, you're
kid
just a kid trying
you
to
know?
survive a very traumatic experience.
Exactly.
If it happened to an adult, they couldn't probably handle it. And here's a child, you're a baby.
And I'll tell you that the reason why I'm grateful that they sent it, Elizabeth, is because I was almost embarrassed. I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed of what I had submitted. And I was really hard on myself, thinking like, damn, this is my one shot to connect with the Supreme Court, to tell them about all the wrongs that had gone, wrong in court or whatever. And I squandered it. I felt very like it took it very to heart that I squandered this opportunity. But to my surprise, it really motivated me to go to school. I'm like, look, if I'm going to communicate from now on with people, asking them to, as you said, Kevin, like believe in me, I better formulate a sentence and
Right.
have some clarity in what I'm talking about. And for the next 15 years of my life, I wrote letters. And I mean,
How did you educate yourself other than writing letters? It's not like
yeah,
not
no,
like
yeah,
they-
good point.
they have
So they offer,
college there.
they offer like high schools, and you can read books on. I mean, it wasn't just strictly about like how to write, but it was just like,
I mean, is there an avenue to get your GED while you're in prison?
for sure, yeah. At this specific place where I was at, they offered college courses and high school classes and GED and so on. But it was less about a specific educational path. It's more about like, let me invest in myself, so that if I ever get an opportunity to have that opportunity again that I felt like I squandered, I'll be ready next time. So fast forward 15 years later, coming of age, living, in this new environment that you have to come, accustomed to right, very quickly. I'm now from this juvenile prison. I'm now in the adult side, so I'm now in Folsom Prison, and I was a teacher's aide for a woman by the name of Tony Carter. And Tony was about to retire, and she tells me, basically giving me like a heads up, like I'm leaving, so that means you don't have a job anymore, and this is our last week. My time is up. So she was leaving her career, and that week, I don't want to share this, but I had a dream. I woke up maybe the day after she told me that, and I had this like, there wasn't a visual dream. I just had this like, ask Tony to help you. That's all I can remember. So it was more like a voice, like a message, right? And I wasn't really sure what that meant, but Friday showed up. And as she was leaving, I said, hey, Tony, called her by her first name, and she turned around and she says like, yeah. And I just said like, here, this is it. And I said, Tony, like now that you're retired, if you come across an attorney, a reporter, anyone who you think can help me, would you mind sharing my story? It's kind of like low, like request. Like it wasn't like, oh my God, like leave me the key or some,
And she
Right.
knew that you had communicated all the background.
Oh yeah.
information
So
to
had
her
been
lawyers.
working with her for like years, so she knew what I was going through. But I just had never. Maybe I was good at maybe communicating in writing. Hey, dear whoever, I'm the guy in prison. I'm innocent. Will you help me? But now I'm asking face to face, and so she said, yeah, sure, I can do that. And so lo and behold, about a month or two after she had been retired, she was invited to a book signing. There was an author, Bo Lozoff. The guy wrote a book called "We're All Doing Time." He's passed since then, but at the time he was in Sacramento where she lived, and so she was invited to this event. And she shows up, and lo and behold, it had nothing to do with law. It had to do with like yoga practices in prison and so on. There was a woman there who, during the Q&A, stands up and says, "Hi, my name is Ellen Eggers. I'm an attorney. And by the way, in Chapter 7, whatever question she had." And Tony, to her credit, she's like, "Oh, did she say attorney?" And so that moved her at some point to say, "Hey, introduced herself, and my former teacher's aide, whatever, Franky Carrillo, is in Folsom, and I believe is innocent. You mind me sharing some, whatever." So she did her part. She was the messenger. She relayed the message to
Wow.
this attorney.
And Ellen Eggers was at Innocence
Exactly.
Project, right?
Yep.
I
So
mean,
then that led her to come see me at Folsom, and it kind of went from there. So here I am thinking I'm going to write this perfect letter, to your point, right? I'm going to convince someone and be like, "Oh my God, this guy, who's this guy? Let me write him back," or whatever, right? That's not the way it happened. So
That was divine intervention. I mean, I really believe that. I mean, you have a dream, so just ask. And I mean, this woman that you've created this relationship with knows your story and not only believed you, but went out and actually did what she promised she was going to do. So you touched her in a way that I really believe like that thought was divine intervention, which is beautiful because now going through this, you have become an advocate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about what life was like, how you got out, what was like after, and what you're doing now.
Sure, sure. So, so Ellen Eggers put a team together, and then they, solved this case. Was officially solved, and it proved that they had the wrong kid all along. Now that kid was a man, and I was came back to court, and the evidence proved that that I was innocent. I was exonerated. That's the word they use. You've been exonerated after being wrongfully convicted. And so I've been home now for 12
such a
years.
word.
It's like,
that word
I'm
doesn't.
sorry that shouldn't have
Yeah,
happened.
bro.
Yeah,
It's a thing.
not exonerated for you, in your daily,
Yeah.
I'm sure that emotionally as a child, there's things. How do you deal with the emotional side of, do you feel angry at times? Like, what are the emotions of losing 26 years, right?
20 years.
20 years of your life, and then you're out. What did that feel like? I'm sure elation, and you were finally seen.
Mm-hmm.
But then with that comes a lot of other emotions. So how did that transition for you?
Yeah. You're right. I think the initial idea was to never be seen or heard from ever again.
Right.
That's the sentence.
Right.
I mean, and then, you're whatever happens on the inside, maybe you get killed, maybe whatever, right? Or you lose all hope. So that was legit. Like, I was never supposed to be seen from or heard from again. I think how I managed to, I guess, cope with it is, a lot of self-reflection, applying things that I'd learned, advice that I'd heard, other people's mistakes that I, recycled, repurposed, and applied. I've been home for 12 years now, and I would be lying to you if I told you I don't think about what happened to me. I think about it all the time, and I know that it's molded me into the person that I am today. And I think it's more, and I maybe minimize it by saying, I'm just optimistic. I can brush it off. But I realize that I feel like I've been designed to carry people's stuff. I've always been super strong, even as a kid. And it's funny because when I was in prison, the guys were like, "Damn, how do you got these like your muscles, man? You're so strong." Like, dude's just checking you out, but they're giving you like a physical, like a compliment about like your workouts.
Right.
And I'm like, I don't know how I got that, dude. Like, it's just, I don't know, maybe push-ups, But I feel as time when had gone on, that I had been carrying other people's burdens for such a long time, like invisible, but they were weighing on me. And I learned how to like talk that way and like release those things or put those things down. And or those lessons that I had learned from others to kind of like be of service and, carry people's plights for them. Yeah, maybe. Maybe they were, obviously in this case, I was forced to carry that.
Right.
But that's just one example of like you identify these things about your own personal patterns that you gotta free yourself from as well, and I was never really religious. I know even though religious didn't come up, but I think that I definitely was in a world where was very unique because you're now around people with many different backgrounds, belief systems, ideologies, coping mechanisms. So you're shopping around for for people how they model
Right.
or how they live out their beliefs. And so I was kind of stealing their rhythm. I was like, oh, I like the way this guy conducts himself. Oh, he's a Buddhist. Oh, okay, maybe I'll read up on some Buddhism or something. Or take it from there, right?
Oh, wow.
How do you reconcile 20 years? I mean, I ever since I watched the Innocence Files,
Yeah.
I was thinking to myself, I'm like, from if you take my life from age 16 to 36, I finished high school, went to college, medical school, and did 2 residencies and got married.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, that's like a lifetime.
Yeah.
And it's like the prime of your life.
Yeah.
And the fact that you can have such a good attitude about it is remarkable.
Yeah.
It really is.
Thank you, Kevin. You know, it's interesting. You know, you use these hallmark moments in your life, and you know the way I thought about it, because there was some survivor's guilt that kind of kicked in for me as well, and you know, just even today I was sharing with a friend that, you know, I felt that my life, everyone that I grew up with, my age or folks in my world, were at a starting line, like in the Olympics, you know, run for marathon
Right.
or whatever. So the big race of life, right? And before the gun went off, they say, "Hey, Frankie, like, come over here. You know, you sit this one out." But the race continued for everybody else. So
Right.
gun goes off, life happens. And the way I look at it is that 20 years later, they put me on that line by myself. Said, "Okay, dude, why even, you know, shoot the gun? Just run, just live your life, you know." And you know, it's been 12 years since I've been out, but I'm grateful that I'm enjoying this run, this life, this opportunity, and you know, for the good or bad of it, you know, like I'm the first to go to college in my family. You know, I was 20 years.
That's amazing.
You know,
You were at LMU, right?
went to LMU, yeah, not too far from here, and I feel like I've achieved so much. I think, you know, I feel like I've endured this horrific experience, and I made I'm very optimistic to try to repurpose it and not, you know, let it overwhelm me. But I think it's one of these things where, you know, I'm juxtaposing a lot of stuff here, but I think at the core of it is that, you know, I have an opportunity to run that race, and I want to make the best out of it. I want to live my best life, and one of the things that is at the core of what I'm doing today is I'm running for public office, and you know, it's such a privilege to be able to do all the things that I'm doing. But I think this one in specific is the idea of it is very hopeful. It's a position where I can lead, I can be at the table. I think the lived experience that I would bring to solve a lot of our problems, or at least to give ideas about, you know, what's going to happen next in our state, I think it's pretty cool.
And tell us about that. Tell us
Yeah.
about the project that you're, you know.
Well,
that
you're running for state assembly, right?
State assembly, yeah. So,
And tell what does that mean, and what's the likelihood that I'm going to see you on the, you know,
undercover GQ or what?
no, I was going to say on the new on the that we know is going to happen.
Yes.
So make a call. I mean, he's a handsome guy.
I know.
I know.
Thank you.
If you're not watching this on YouTube, you should watch it on YouTube. No, that you're going to be standing up there giving an acceptance speech and have hopefully a brilliant political career,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, that's what I'm manifesting now. So I'm talking about a life of service, really. So, you know, I'm serving a different kind of time here. Now I'm serving the community. You know, the chances are as good as they can be. You know, I think the idea is believing in yourself, believing in the process, and really giving this a go. You know, not only about campaigning or, you know, still having faith in the system, you know, because it's kind of back to a different system, right? But believing that you would be of service there, that your voice would matter, that you would have an impact. And the impact that I hope to have is for people who maybe feel disillusioned with the system to believe, like, man, look at this guy. Of all people, this is the guy who should not be a believer anymore.
Right.
But he has inspired me. He is hopeful. He believes that justice will prevail, or justice for all, I suppose, at the very end. And so I'm just grateful. Like I'm grateful, I might minimize it and say, I went from the big house now to the state house, but the idea is to say like, look, man, people, of all walks of life can run for public office, and why not me?
Well, you took something that was a very people can't even imagine what you went through, and you're turning it into your optimism is something that has served you well in all cases, it seems like. And now you're out here serving your community. Yep. And bringing your experience and talking about it and helping other people and talking about reform and talking all of that. And also, you have a project.
I do. Yeah.
That is, it's a restorative project, the Franky Carrillo Teen Court. Tell us a little bit about that.
Love that you rolled the R on
I
that.
know you did, yeah. So 2 different projects there. So I was...
Yes.
So the first one is my passion project. So it's a nonprofit here in Los Angeles.
Okay.
So when I came home from prison, from my experience, one of the things that I noticed was different was that people didn't have toolboxes anymore. People weren't fixing things in your own home.
Right.
Maybe in some cases you've never fixed stuff. That was never an example. But in my life, something broke, you gave it a shot.
Right.
Before you trashed it, you like, let me see what, maybe
I could do something.
maybe the wire's loose or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So you took it apart and you messed with it, and I felt that experience had sort of been no longer with us, at least what I had noticed. And so I figured, this was something that was passed down to me as a therapeutic process. I later discovered. So my dad will, be in the garage, and we had every tool possible as, growing up. And so for me, those things were really important. And so the project is really about repurposing. So finding things that others have seen or classified of not having value, and reassigning value to these things that you have either refurbished, repurposed, and because I felt like that's what happened to me. I was
just thinking that the analogy of you of restoring something that as a child you were ripped, this beautiful child, and now look where you've come, right? And so you're bringing that same thing into like an art form almost.
Exactly.
And that's really beautiful and very cathartic.
Yeah, no, thank you. As a Cubana, I hope I'm not exposing your
it's
your roots
okay.
here, But I think there's these amazing stories about people who, what this is what we have to make this 1950 Chevy work with a Toyota engine or whatever. They just what you got, right? And you put it together and you make it happen. But the project is one where it has a therapeutic foundation to it. I like to believe that we should practice with these tactile, mechanical things about taking things apart and putting them back together, or trying to fix something, because I think it spills over into real life. Mm-hmm. If you never practice that, how to fix, especially as a kid, how do you mend relationships? How do you fix things as you move forward?
Right.
And so practice with that lawnmower. It's not gonna no harm, no foul. But at least you have an idea of like the steps that it entails.
Where is that actually happening?
So we own a large ranch here in LA County, mm-hmm. And so the idea is to let that be the main hub,
like a camp kind of.
Yeah, like you sort of separate yourself from your environment. You kind of it's about an hour drive from here, and the idea is that you will be able to detach from your comfort zone, be in a place where you can sort of like decompress, and while you're there, you sort of get into these practices of just turning something that was either discarded into something beautiful as a piece of art, or bringing something back to life. I love old cars. I'm a big collector of things that others would maybe think they're junk, but I think at the core of who I am, I feel like that's the theme in my life. Especially being in a place where I had been discarded, and so many other people had been discarded, and to see them reinstill value in their lives, either through they rehabilitated or they found amends with themselves for whatever they had done. It's very inspiring to see that. So it's my form of keeping that spirit alive.
Very cool.
I love it.
In the teen court, I was honored. So there's a program here in LA County, actually throughout the state, where they have high school students create these teen courts. It's an official court that is based on a high school. So the one that is assigned with my name, which is such an honor, it's Esteban Torres High School in East LA, and the Social Justice Learning Academy, where they have the teen court is housed. It's based, and these are young students, high school students, who are learning about the law, learning how to judge, how to assess information, how to say, oh, that's bullshit or not, whatever, and then they make a ruling. So they're like mini juries, right?
Oh my God, that's
and I'd love it because, God forbid you're whatever age and they call you into a real jury,
like a mock court,
and you're
mock
like,
trial.
yeah, exactly, and you're thinking, oh, what do I do now? Like you have no idea how to exercise that decision making. So it's amazing. Yeah, it's really good.
well, something so tragic, you have just really created, and you're out there touching and helping so many people. And I'm sure that moving forward in a few years back, somebody's going to reach out and say, you don't know how much you helped me. And that's going to be like life full circle for you. I think it's what you're doing is just amazing. And what is the Netflix story
Series,
that they
yeah.
did on you, and how did that come about?
Yeah, so pre-pandemic, I got a call from Barry Sheck, who's the co-founder of the Innocence Project. He's based in New York, and he asked me if I would be interested in this, in sharing my story with the world, basically. And so the Innocence Project and Netflix had brokered a deal, and they wanted, I think, 7 of the top cases that they had solved, that they had exonerated. And so I was honored to be selected. And so, of course, I said yes. Not knowing that it's a documentary, not knowing the way it's going to turn out, not knowing how they're going to edit it, So
They did a really nice job.
I
with
agree,
it.
bro. I agree. Yeah.
I mean, like really, I think it it covered so much more than we were even able to cover here.
Right.
It's 2 hours. Two
Yep.
episodes.
So the show's called
The Innocence Files.
The Innocence Files. My episodes are episode 4 and 5.
Okay, I gotta
If
watch.
you want to skip all the ones before and after, feel free. But
Yes.
I'm right in the middle.
Okay, that's perfect, right? Well,
Although those might be good stories too.
really quick before we have to start wrapping up,
Sure.
what does your future look like? What can we expect from Franky Carrillo, and what do you think the future holds for you?
So
Politics.
no, you know what? I want to. I'm a dad. I want to continue being a great father. I want to lead. I want to be of service. If that ends up being public office, that's amazing. That's where my goal is right now, and I'm looking forward to that. But I really want to inspire people, and I think that the political world, the world of public service, is one where you can do that. But in my case, I want to use what I went through and put it to good use, I suppose, right?
Right.
And the reality is that I'm just a common man. I'm a man of the people. I feel like I'm very humble, and I think that end of the day, I want that to remain at the core of who I am. And I will say that I'm not a survivor. I think that a lot of folks have lately been saying, "Oh, you survived that," and I kind of push back a little bit and say, I think someone who survives cancer, like that, they're cancer survivors, or a car accident, like they survived a horrific accident, or maybe parts of the world where tornadoes, they survived a tornado, But I think what I did was I think that the complexity of surviving a wrongful conviction is, not to be over dramatic here, but like you really resurrected yourself after being sent away to never be seen from again. And it's not to minimize the survivors, like all credit to them, but this is like a completely other level of
because it takes this was also beyond your control.
Absolutely.
But the cards were stacked against you. I mean, seriously, again, but not just you. Right. Everyone who finds himself in that same position, but in your case, really stacked against you, like intentionally stacked against you. And so the fact that you were able to turn that around is remarkable.
Yeah,
it really is.
Yeah,
and inspirational. It really, really is. You're giving voice to people that don't have it, and you know what it feels like because you had to experience that.
So you messed up my final question because I always ask people at the end of the show, like, if you weren't doing what you're doing now, what are you gonna do? But now we know.
Yeah, no, but you know what? It's you know, it was such an honor to meet you. I know we met. I know we start off with how we met, and I'll maybe wrap it up by saying, you know, what an honor it was to be in a space. You know, my partner and I were there, really unexpected to see what was going to happen, or what we were kind of like walking into.
It really was kind of the most random night, wasn't it?
It was a moment where it was a room, at least for me, it was a room full of strangers that were engaging as if they were best friends.
Well, it was funny because he called me that night, and he's like, I have an amazing guest, Franky Carrillo. We're going to have him on the show. And he kind of gave me like, and I was like, we have to do it. So it's an honor and a pleasure to meet you. And Kevin has talked so much about you.
He's an amazing man. Thank you, Kevin.
And thank you.
Stop.
Thank you.
Please.
So I don't know if you have social media. You would like to give our listeners your social media if anybody's interested in reaching out. Please.
How can they help you campaign, contribute?
Yeah, absolutely. Vote? Yeah. So if you live in the Assembly District 52, definitely vote for me. I'm your man.
Is that Echo Park?
It's
area?
Echo Park. So home is Echo Park, and so it's Echo Park, Los Feliz, Silver Lake, Cypress Park, Eagle Rock, Boyle Heights, East LA. Highland Park, parts of Glendale.
Okay.
And, you know, for the folks who are engaged, you know, you can look it up and you'll find, you know, Assembly District 52.
Okay.
Really, I'm an Instagram guy. So Franky Carrillo Jr. at Instagram. You'll see my face there. So it's me. But I think helping out, people can volunteer on the campaign. Obviously, the more the better. I'm back to that situation where I was on the inside. I'm writing these letters now, right? Or I'm petitioning people to believe in me. You know, stand with
you,
and you know, and to it's sort of like, you know, it's deja vu in some weird way, you know. But I really believe that this is the right thing. It's my calling, and obviously contribution. So campaigns can't run without, you know, financial support. So if people can contribute, that'll be amazing as well.
Well, I believe in you, Frankie.
Thank you.
Yeah,
yes.
I don't think you're gonna have a problem.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, really thank you so much for coming in.
Really great having you on. Thank you.
Likewise.
Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the O.R. with Dr. Brenner. Make sure to subscribe, like, and follow so you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, hit me up on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Kevin Brenner MD and KevinBrennerMD.com.